concept of a central railway link was first planned almost 100 years ago. In the 1970s, Mayor Robbie almost got it off the ground. Currently under construction, it comprises of a 3.45 kilometre twin tunnel underground railway link up to 42 metres below the surface. It will extend from Britomart to Mount Eden and incorporate 2 underground stations, due to be completed in 2023. It is expected to cost $3.4 billion. John Fellows grew up in the United Kingdom and started work at the British Railways Chief Architects Department at the age of 18. He has been involved with the Channel Tunnel Rail Link project, the Thameslink project, Crossrail and Sydney North West Rail. John is now the CRL Station Manager. Chris Jack, our second speaker, is a director of Jasmax. His main involvement is with large complex civic projects. Previously, Chris has been involved with work on Auckland Railway network, including station design. For the last 4 years, Chris has been project architect for the CRL. Welcome.
Thanks very much. Right, thank you very much for inviting us to present to you today. I was telling some of the sponsors out the back that when I came to New Zealand, it was quite by a sudden shock. I received a call when I was in Crossrail to just pop over to New Zealand by Mott McDonald to help the local office win the design contract for City Railway. So I popped over, it's a long pop, and worked like a dog for a week, gave the presentation on Friday, and went home on Saturday night, thought, well, back to Crossrail again. Opened the first email Monday morning, jet lagged to hell when I was in the office, and it was, first email was from the local office manager saying, John, hey, they were really impressed, they've awarded the contract early, come straight back. And I've been here ever since and love the place. It is fantastic. And the City Rail Link project is just perfect for a growing city, and it needs it desperately. So really proud to be working on the project and delivering such a vital bit of infrastructure to the city. And since I've been here, I've met a beautiful Kiwi woman and married her, and I shall be here forever because I love the place. So, who are we? So we're not Auckland Transport anymore. For those that haven't noticed the change, we are now City Rail Link Limited. We're a limited company, a delivery vehicle basically for the City Rail Link. We have 2 sponsors. We have the Crown and we have Auckland Council. We have a new chairman, new board, a new identity, but it's the same old us actually as our co-located project team with Chris and all the others in the team. We're about 100 strong or thereabouts. It varies depending on what stage of the project we're at. So our identity changes. We are no longer part of Auckland Transport, although quite frankly we still work very closely with them because they ultimately, along with Kiwi Rail and others, will be taking the asset that we create once we finish. So a number of agreements are being put in place to make sure that that is happening and that we get all of their input into the delivery of the project itself. So from a planned outcomes point of view, it's really important to restate this every time we present so that everyone understands what it is our objectives are, because we're delivering this amazingly attractive, safe railway that will transform transport through the city centre. Now, to take what is currently 20 trains an hour going into Britomart, all of them have to stop. The drivers and train crew have to get out, walk to the other end, get in the other end of the train, and the train has to chug back out again. So that's 20 trains an hour. We will be delivering 24 trains an hour in each direction, 48 trains an hour into the city centre, which means we have the capability of delivering 36,000 people into the CBD in the peak hour of every day. Now that compares with what Britomart currently has. In the peak hour it has about 8,000, 7,500. So this is a real step change in the way transport can be provided to the city centre. We've got the future-proofing that we provide at each of our stations for commercial development, because that's the right thing to do. We're not commercial developers. we are future-proofing for that to happen by others. So we provide the extra concrete and structure in the ground to carry the load points to be able to develop above the entrances. We're aiming for the project to be incredibly sustainable. Some of the new practices we're bringing from a sustainability point of view are being borrowed from our cousins in Australia, but tweaked for our use in New Zealand. But we're breaking new ground, and we're also exceeding our targets of excellent in the IS rating table for the works that we've already done. So we're ahead of target already, and we aim to stay there. From a point of view of the completion, everyone gets worried about when we complete. All of these big projects take time, and I'm quite used to that. This is the 4th big project I've worked on, and we're due to complete in 2023-24 and commence operations. So these things do take time, but that's nothing to be worried about. If you go around the world, it's a fairly typical timescale for projects of this size. So in terms of the route, for those that aren't familiar with the route, we start off in Britomart to the north, and the tunnelling work that's already started in terms of the cut and cover tunnels that you see on site at the moment carry us through to nearly to Aotea Station, which is in between Victoria Street and Wellesley Street. And then from there, the bored tunnels commence, going right through to Karangahape Ridge, where we're about 32 metres under the ground for a new station at Karangahape, and then continue on just getting under the motorway junction, and then we're about 40 metres or so below Newton Ridge before we come out at Mount Eden. And the difficulty there, of course, is that we go through a whole series of different geological layers, and we call this climbing the hill. Railways don't like hills by and large, but we have a 70-odd metre difference between Britomart, where the tracks exist, and the North Auckland line at Mount Eden, where the tracks exist, and we must join the dots. So we have to climb at a 3.5% gradient through very soggy, waterlogged mud at Britomart, go through some quite soft East Coast-based sandstones going up Albert Street, until we get to the station at Aotea, level platform. Climb again at 3.5% grade, going up towards Karangahape, where our new station sits roughly between Pitt Street and Mercury Lane, and then the level platform again, of course, and then climb at 3.5% grade all the way up to the point where we break surface at Mount Eden, and we're into basalt, which is blasting material. So very, very difficult geology across the whole range of the areas across the route. Now we do this in 3 different ways. We have our cut and cover tunnels. These are the ones that are being built right now that you can see being constructed in Albert Street. Once we get to the station at Aotea, that's a large top-down construction box, around 300 metres long, which contains the 150-metre platform plus the plant rooms and other things that have to sit at the end of the platform. And then we continue on then in the bored tunnels, which are the 6.8 metre or so diameter bored tunnels, and then arrive at Karangahape Station, which is a mined tunnel station, where we have 2 mined tunnels of about 12 metre diameters, although they're never round, they're always squish-shaped, which then each contain a platform with a central concourse space, and linked up to the surface via inclined escalator shafts, again in mined construction. Those are typical construction techniques for tunnelling projects. What is unusual here is the geology and the way in which we must be very careful with how we go through the geology. And of course, to make sure all of that happens, we have to have a huge construction site, a logistics construction site, which is already obtained. We've already bought all the land at Mount Eden. It's about 2.4 hectares in size, and that will be the point at which we launch the tunnel boring machines, going down to Aotea once, lifting it out the shaft. Great photo opportunity. I can tell you when that happens. You should be there to take a photo. They load it onto the truck, take it back to Mount Eden, and then they bore the second bore down. And the reason it has to be done that way is you need 2.4 hectares to do it. And you haven't got 2.4 hectares of land in the centre of the city, so you have to do it that way. It has to be down, return, and then come back again. So the story so far. Well, we've got all the surface properties acquired. We're acquiring most, if not all, of the subsurface properties, because of course New Zealand's a bit strange. You own the land to the centre of the earth. It's not the same where I come from, but that doesn't matter. So we have to acquire all of these little bits of land underneath properties as well. So our temporary facilities for the station at Britomart, that's already built and operating, opened on time after Christmas, doing a great job, because that allows us to get everybody out of the station in terms of the facilities to do the work at Britomart station itself. Contract 2 is the work that goes through the Albert Street, so that is proceeding, that's been let and is contracted, and the works are proceeding really well. And from there we have to get into our procurement space for the rest of the project. So the project's split up into 9 contracts. So contracts 1 and 2 are already happening. Contract 3 is the rest of the tunnels and the stations. Contract 5, there isn't a contract 4, C4 was thought to be a bit dodgy. Contract 5 is the work along the North Auckland line. So that's all in the operational envelope of the existing railway, so it's sensible that it's partitioned off. Contract 6 is a major utility move up at Mount Eden. Contract 7 is all the systems, line-wide systems, right the way through the whole project. Very complex, signalling, track, overhead wire, all that sort of stuff. And then we've got Contract 8 are some things we have to do on the wider network that are beyond our city centre location. And then Contract 9 is a little piece of work, very important piece of work, that we can only do once operations start at the east end of Britomart. So that's the final contract piece of the jigsaw. And the cut and cover that I've described, those of you who haven't been to the city centre, I'm sure you've seen it already. Basically from Wyndham Street through to Britomart, crossing the area of Commercial Bay under construction. They are constructing those bits of tunnels for us. And if you look down in the hole, you can actually see the formation of those tunnels now. And then through to Britomart itself, where Chris will show you the detail of what we're doing in there. So this is a interesting little video clip of the protection systems that we've put in place up Albert Street. Everyone thinks of, well, what's big holes in the ground, and bear in mind these holes are 17, 18 metres across, 15 metres deep. What's it going to do to my property? Well, we've put in place a complete laser monitoring system right the way up the street to detect every single movement. And if you go down Albert Street, you will see a whole host of little white discs that are parked on the footway edges and on buildings and so on. And each one of those is reflecting a laser pointer that is then bouncing the signal back to a central computer, and that central computer is monitoring every aspect of the movement of buildings in the city as we're doing the works. It was quite interesting. Work nearly stopped one day when there was a huge spike in the movement of properties. It was the Kaikoura earthquake. We detected it on our detectors, even though we couldn't feel it ourselves in terms of the movement. So this is just typical of the kind of sophisticated technology that underground railways have to utilise to make sure that we can monitor safely all of the buildings around us, to make sure that they don't move, crack, and do things that were unexpected. We expect movement, but always within tolerances, and therefore anything that steps out of the tolerance, work stops, construction reviewed, steps taken to correct. So this is a typical way of maintaining the balance.
Just a quick question. Will they stay there forever?
No, they stay there beyond the completion of construction. I can't remember the timescale here, but it's usually for several months afterwards, and then they're removed once you're confident that the ground is settled as far as it's ever going to.
They did that same system in London on the underground tunnels
For Crossrail.
Underneath the
Yep,
underneath
Crossrail
the
they
Thames.
did, yep.
And they had a whole bunch of historic buildings they did to make sure they did.
Absolutely. I had to get several of those consents for those heritage buildings to put the damn things there. Always difficult. So passenger capacity, this is all about people. I used to teach a course up at Birmingham University in the UK, a master's degree course for engineers and architects about railway design. And every time I did it, I'd get a £20 note, slap it on the desk, say, hey, rich consultant, poor students, tell me the first question you ask the client when you're given a job to design a railway station. And of course they'd say all sorts of things like ground conditions, length of the trains, all this sort of stuff. It's the people. How many people? If I were to ask anybody in the room, what's the first question you ask about if you had to design a football stadium? It's how many people? So why do people not understand that railway stations are about bloody people? So the issue here is, how do you define what it is you're designing for? Well, our capacity is based on full trains, 24 of them coming in from each direction, discharging all of their load, leaving empty. You can't get full of them full trains. So, how do we know that everything works when we've got... that one won't work, will it? I can't get the second one to work because it's not a touch screen. Anyway, how do you know that it all works? Well, we test it. We test it through steps passenger modelling, and this puts real people in real numbers in 2046 or whatever the date might be that we decide, and it tests the space with variable speeds of walking, people with pushchairs, people with wheelchairs, luggage, and we test every aspect of our design to make sure the size is right for the future-proofing for the railway going forward. We also have a single... got it working, right. We also have a single source of truth in the BIM model. So this is a single federated model produced by the team, which Chris's team and the Oricon team put together the BIM model, which actually takes every aspect of the design, puts it into a single federated model. It's not all Revit modelling, some of it is other models as well. They're federated into a single three-dimensional object, and basically every aspect of our design plugs into that. It enables us to check to make sure the ducts, the ventilation ducts, the platforms, the kinematic envelope for the train, all the beams, all the structures, all the piles actually work and fit together. And these days we rely upon this and not drawings. And that's the big departure. So when we go to tender, we will be going to tender on a BIM model, not a set of drawings, as part of the tender process. So you can see this helps us coordinate every aspect of the very complex plant and equipment that has to go in each of the stations, particularly because the stations are the bits that carry the equipment for every other part of the project. Single source of truth. It is the future. Chris, talk us through our design philosophy.
Thanks, John. So, look, I'd like to just take a little bit of time to probably talk about some of the stakeholder relationships that have informed some of the design. Through the procurement process, I mean, John talks about at the beginning there the reference design, and probably for the last 3 or 4 years that's been around really proving the sort of functional and technical requirements of the stations, the alignment, the mechanical systems, the architecture, so that we know we've got everything fits and everything works. That reference design will be taken by the bid teams and developed by the selected contractor into the sort of detailed phase. So it is a design build contract. But obviously, what's important to us is what is the sort of identity of the station for the city, and how do we protect that through a design build process. So a lot of the work as well has been engaging with mana whenua, engaging with the city, engaging with the key stakeholders, and setting up a framework which we'll hope will protect that sort of design integrity through the process. Mana whenua has been a very key part of that journey. So there were 8 mana whenua who identified their interest in CRL very early. and have very much been part of not just the design process, but the sort of relationship process. So very much across the procurement, across the sustainability, across the consenting processes. So that's written sort of fundamentally into the NOR. We've had sort of hui's every month for the last 4 years, and we have a design forum hui that's a fortnightly basis, and that's an open forum to discuss all matters of design, and that's sort of with all our key stakeholder parties. So we were here 12 years ago, and we sort of wonder why we didn't do it the first time around, but that was sort of Britomart V1. I'm not sure if everyone is aware that at that time we did, the outermost platforms do have light rail tunnels, which were sort of the future at the time, and for some reason
the only problem was they wanted to rise up and come
into the
through
CPO, yeah, it was,
and out through the front door. Can you imagine what that would have done to the
sure what we were all thinking back then, but this is where we are now. So Sandrine's just parked herself into the CPO over the last week, and she's about to make her way, starting with all the D-wall installation through the CPO. So the construction of the main tunnels, I think. Gonna work at that? Great. So designed specifically to fit around all the heritage kind of columns, and we are making a mess of Albert Street, as John mentioned before, with the first cut and cover in sections heading up Albert Street. And so once we've completed the CPO, this is what we'll see. I mean, it's largely a reinstatement, but you'll notice a significant difference here as we've lowered the floor. And it was a lot of discussion initially to retain that, obviously to reflect the old banking chamber, and we thought we might have a bit of a battle, but everyone sort of understands now the nature of the capacity, as John talked about. So the big moves here is to move the gate line from where it's currently located down on platforms. As we see significant increase in the capacity of the station, we really need to deal with that up at the concourse level to preserve all the sort of safety and security of managing a much busier sort of station. So the banking chamber is removed. We still reflect the nature of that old historical chamber within the floor, and we get a good sort of reinstatement of the CPO with sort of adjustments to the ticketing and retail aspects of that ground floor. One of the significant wins is the reinstatement of the lower Queen Street area. We've got the buses although you see one here, this was an earlier, we've now got rid of the buses, so buses will be removed from Galway and Tyler. They will be shared spaces, and we'll effectively have a pedestrianised reinstatement of lower Queen. So we see really a true sort of civic space reinstated, and obviously with Precinct and Commercial Bay working through the Commercial Bay property at the moment, a sort of great civic space put back in front of the CPO. As we make our way up the first phases of Albert Street, after the cut and cover, we start to reinstate that. It is a civic PT street, but we'll see a significant improvement in the width of the footways up Albert Street, and sort of beginning the character of the future Albert Street as it gets reinstated as part of the C3 contract. Just a view sort of back towards the water, one of the kind of key characteristics of Albert Street. And I guess what CRL doing as an enabler is lots of key interdependencies and enablers of other activities happening around the city. You'll see the ADO with the council published recently the sort of focus of the specific waterfront area of the master plan. Other key moves are the sort of green link as part of the Victoria Street upgrade. So CRL is a sort of enabler of that first sort of portion of work around the entrances. So that's Victoria Street from sort of Queen Street towards the entrance. So we sort of, when we embarked on the reference design, there was a kind of, I guess some key concepts was that for us, function, performance and personality should be treated equally. We probably in the last initial parts of the reference design really had to sort of knuckle down and focus on function and performance, and probably in the last year or so we've really started to up the personality, and that's been through some of the sort of holistic design process with Mana Whenua, with the arts team at council and the wider stakeholder group. But it's important to wrap that within that sort of idea of a sort of an ecology as a system. So how do we sort of create a unique New Zealand transport experience? And it is an opportunity to tell a distinct story of who we are. London, Paris, when you start to look at precedents around the world, you see a very sort of unique sense of place and culture and where they are. We've probably struggled sometimes to define the image of the city as we should see it and be confident enough to do that. And we feel they're cultural spaces as much as they are functional spaces, certainly in the sense of the significance of undergrounds and transportation networks. They do have a function to move people, but they have a sort of cultural role, I think, of defining who we are and where we are, probably importantly. So we did a lot of mapping with Mana Whenua. We did a lot of initial sort of you can't define those things by yourselves. You've got to kind of, the image of the city is defined by the people who kind of inhabit the city. So a wider consultation with those groups to sort of understand what that might be. And out of that, sort of driven by Mana Whenua, was a key sort of organising idea that the sort of idea that the creation myth, the sort of evolution of kind of human life through running in Papatūānuku was that sort of one that probably resonated from a sense of when we talk about undergrounds and earth and sky, they're pretty relevant in terms of that sort of journey from the sea to the monga. So that was kind of an interesting one to start to understand how that might be expressed in the sort of architectural response of a station. So I guess the key thing about that sort of journey was that there's a probably vital part of that element of stations, which is the threshold. So how the entrances, how that sort of process of transitioning from sky to earth might be sort of celebrated within a sort of a journey, a customer experience of a station, and how that might sort of manifest as a sort of building as a diagram. So a little bit of modelling to understand what that might be, and so we've sort of come up with a term for the sky. And these are when we start to understand the functional requirements of the station. We have lots of with the big underground stuff, we've got all our sort of TVS and plant and equipment that has to go somewhere, and it's above ground. So our sky elements generally are dealing with quite complex kind of air and ventilation requirements, and the earth elements obviously are dealing with all those kind of human interactions of people sort of engaging with the entrances and the platforms themselves. But this sort of compelling idea around the sort of tension or the threshold is an opportunity to sort of celebrate a day-night condition, engage with sort of further artistic expression. So the unique sort of journey for the CRL as John said, sort of connecting the dots from Waitemata up to Mangawhau is that sort of transition of quite interesting geology, but also place. From the sea to the monga, sort of through the valley at sort of Aotea, up at the ridgeline at Karangahape. So some very clear sort of distinctions of unique historical significance, some narratives, and the geology and sort of nature of place. So those were kind of important to start to sort of understand what those are and how they might inform the evolving design. The Hotachu stream, it sort of ran from the sort of valley up at Myers down to the Waitemata as a sort of key sort of idea that given it's sort of the rail almost follows the old sort of pathway, that it was a place of abundance. It was a place of sort of people coming together and making. So this kind of idea of the piu-piu and the sort of craft. So those were kind of interesting expressions. So really what we started to sort of look at is how do we preserve a sort of an idea, and the thresholds really became an opportunity to celebrate when we talk about holistic design, not just about defining us an architecture of something, but how might we sort of have an element that expresses it's a collaboration of Mana Whenua, of architecture, of art, of sound, of light. So the thresholds will be those kind of unique opportunities to define each station's kind of sense of place. So as an idea, it's this, there's sort of a sense of the Nihau Taniwha, the sort of piu-piu sort of hanging, that vertical element, the underside sort of referencing the sort of flow and nature of that Hotachu stream, that it would be dynamically lit, that we're sort of exploring the idea of sound interaction with that it might be sort of kinetic in its movement. But the evolution of that will be through a collaborative design process with mana whenua artists, with sound engineers, and so really sort of as a kind of opportunity for an identity that's going to be a key kind of exploration for us. Wellesley Street entrance at Aotea is next to Bledisloe, and we're setting up an opportunity for a laneway connection down to the square. And what you're starting to see, as John mentioned, was a preservation of oversight opportunities with a bit of a construction yard at each of the sites. Obviously, significant one at Mount Eden is ensuring that the station didn't limit those. So, structural strengthening, the servicing of those stations, the enabling of those opportunities are.
We have a consent for a 24-storey tower over the Wellesley Street entrance in the outline massive consent, but again, that's given us a greater pointer to the structures that we need to put in the ground to carry the loads.
So just to get context of the main platform, so the sort of 200 metre long concourse sitting directly under Albert Street, and you can see the council building there, and obviously Sky City, and we've got skylights within a median running up Albert Street. 7 of them sort of referencing Matariki as again another narrative sort of exploration. The upper concourse, the platform itself, island platform, and moving people off platform sort of early around through lifts, stairs and escalators at each end to deal with that capacity at the peak hour. And then looking down the platform itself with the up and down mains on the side, the volume of the concourse, and then the skylights sort of running through the median at the top. So we're sort of 9 or 10 metres below the surface at this point. And as John mentioned, this is now a consented scheme to preserve that OSD opportunity above the station. So the station capacity, its gravity capacity, its servicing capacity, its location of the core will support that future development. So as we sort of make our way up the ridge to Mercury Lane at Karangahape Road. So we can see we've got a binocular sort of arrangement, the more sort of traditional underground arrangement. So up and down mains sort of either side and adits with a central sort of concourse and adit from the Mercury Lane entrance. The Pitt Street box here is the sort of necessary tunnel ventilation, escape, and other sort of functional rooms with the preservation of the future Beresford entrance through the concourse through to the central adit, and then effectively a separate station box and entrance can be constructed offline of the main pit street. So the significant advantage of the construction in this manner, the railway doesn't have to be shut down. You can maintain operations of the rail and build the future entrance at that point. Through its, John talked about capacity. The capacity of K Road is only necessary for one entrance, but obviously two are set up with the sort of future enabling. And again, OSD enabled above the entrance up to the current sort of height plane. So a more traditional underground arrangement with the side edits. So Tane Mahuta was sort of a significant kind of narrative overlay for this station, and so a sort of an exploration of the nature of craft and carving, and how that sort of evolves from the nature of the tree itself, and how that might manifest itself in a threshold here. And I guess the significance with this particular station is that sort of 30 metre traverse down to platform it's a true underground experience. So that journey of sort of compression will be a unique one for the station. So this idea of the sort of canopy or Tāne Mahuta and its kind of significance was one that's been explored. The volume's kind of revealed at the entrance that this is something that, again, through a collaborative sort of contribution of craft, of making, of carvers, will be a sort of, again, that sort of holistic approach to the station identity at this particular entrance. Starting to see, following the reinstatement again of the Mercury Lane construction site, the oversight opportunities and the opportunities to set up, neighbouring OSD, and through the station siting a laneway connection through to East Street from Mercury Lane to start to, kind of set up an enabling of a sort of secondary laneway that might occur down from Karangahape Road. And looking at the wider sort of improvements of the public realm, in particular sort of access from Karangahape Road itself, the widening of Mercury Lane towards that access, the sort of sharing of surface around the station frontage to slow the traffic and to prioritise those kind of connections. The future light rail station on Upper Queen Street's likely at the opposite end of Cross Street, so good connectivity and interchange between the two at that point. We head up to Mongafo, up to the mountain. Clearly, there's a strong relationship to the Monga itself. The existing station is in a bit of a bowl, but the opportunity comes because of the significant, the 2.5 hectares. We've got a significant amount of reinstatement that we can enable back there. But the opportunities with the NAL at the moment is a kind of lack of access, a lack of legibility is. To really sort of unlock the potential of that area. So we're on a sort of due, if we look at Ruru Street, which connects from New North Road up here, that access is actually direct to the Monga. So the sort of orientation of the station itself and the new road network is setting up some really interesting opportunities in terms of those desire lines to the mountain itself. So what we have is a sort of, with this brownfield site, and the location of the existing NAL platform to the south, the CRL as it exits the trench at Karate Street here, the platform itself, it's a bit like a New Lynn sort of typology. It's again about 9 metres in an open trench below the existing ground. Is the key move for us was really to link Ruru to Mount Eden just at this point here, and set up an address for the station. And then most of the roads then sort of connect off an existing street network, so Nikau, Flower, Nahura all start to sort of set up a reconnected network. And so what we start to see is some sites which enable sort of some sensible block opportunities, a mixed-use precinct. The station really is, again, the sort of catalyst for that regeneration and looking to really just define a bit of a sense of place through that. It's a station with its sort of interchange, with its increased patronage, becoming a place to meet and really sort of kicking off the opportunity within that area. So we can see the sort of opening at the eastern end, the tunnel head house building here with the TVS, all the tunnel vent and kit, the CRL platform and the trench, and the station building sort of located Ruru Street with the NAL sort of crossing over towards the western side. What might that start looking like is, again, that sort of that narrative of the Monga starting to kind of explore the opportunities that might present in terms of the plaza as a sort of first. These are all the sort of opportunities within the mixed-use precinct. The concourse itself and what we do have as part of the Mount Eden development is the sort of station group control centre. So the sort of control centre for the network at this point. All the above ground plant. It's it's not an underground station at this point. Most of the surface requirements are sort of within a surface building, but an opportunity to explore the sort of significance of this element as a sort of. I guess with Mongafo, we're excavating a significant amount of basalt, and we've sort of identified an opportunity there to recover a lot of that basalt, to explore the opportunity for that to be used within the built environment itself. What might the reinstatement look like within the current sort of unitary plan? So the red outline is the NOR, the 2.4 hectares as John described, and this is the sort of density that's possible under that unitary plan. And again, we set the streets up, and then the opportunity comes within this. So this is Ruri Street. You can just see the bridge across the rail at that point, the station building, the view to the Monga, and the new developments as a possibility. We see Shattuck Street as a sort of key, the plaza that we saw before, sort of at the terminus of this, but very much a kind of a pedestrianised sort of linear park sort of opportunity. Existing NAL at this point, we're approaching from Mount Eden Road. You can just see the station in the background here with, again, the opportunities for the mixed-use precinct with Flower Street to our right.
I think it's also worth just pointing out that this will create the potential for probably a residential area of about 3,000 people, and all within probably about 4 minutes travel time of trains every 2.5 minutes to our tip. So an incredibly attractive proposition for an inner suburb actually having direct connection straight to the city centre itself.
Thanks, John. And just a number of new sort of pedestrian bridges and connections to deal with the sort of southern connection to the station. So that's John's just finishing with the rolling sort of models, but a bit of a snapshot of the design. But as we mentioned, the key challenge for us has been to sort of write requirements and be able to. We've used terminologies like mandated design, but we're trying to preserve the framework so that the DNC doesn't sort of lose the opportunity. So that's been our challenge in the last 6 months or so.
Absolutely.
So,
DNC tender process is always one that one might feel somewhat scared of losing some of the content that we've got here. I am pleased to say that through that process we actually have what we call the mandated design philosophy, which we have preserved. I fought very hard for that with the support of the project director, and Chris's team have supported us delivering this mandated component that will guarantee us the quality of the things that you've seen here in terms of the architectural expression, the expression of the narratives that we've taken great pains to develop with Manawhenua with us as design partners, and making sure that we deliver a really good product at the end of this, rather than something that's pretty average and that looks like any other railway around the world. So we hope you've enjoyed the presentation, but are there any questions? Yes.
What sort of interest have you had from developers like at the top of Mount Eden? You're talking about residential sort of precinct there. Is there much interest from potential developers? Or?
We believe the interest is there. It's probably a little early because we know we can't release that site until we finish construction. So we're looking at a 2024 opportunity to step in and undertake the work. So like all developers who might be willing to build up land banks, I would guess that interest is beginning to be stimulated in readiness for that coming forward. As I said earlier, we're not actually developing the designs for development purposes. That's not in our remit. We are future-proofing for them, for others to take the opportunity.
That sort of leads me to my sort of next question, is that, coming from South Auckland, we look at a lot of the problems we've got with transport out that way. I just sort of wonder, obviously people have looked into it to really have got this far, but it always makes me wonder why, is there an issue with transport from the Britomart up to Mount Eden as it is, but it seems to be, my way of thinking, the priority somewhere else. But
the problem at the moment is all trains that come in from the western end have to go through the North Auckland Line platform at Mount Eden, then go to Grafton, then go into Newmarket. They have to go into Newmarket. Don't ask me why they built it this way. I know not why. They go into Newmarket, the driver has to change ends, go to the other end, and then it reverses out to go down the hill, Parnell, through to Britomart. It's a crazy thing to do. You never do that in a mainline railway. But that is the nature of what we have today. So once we introduce the new connection to City Rail Link, instead of doing all that into Newmarket and back again down to Britomart, we just turn the corner, go through the City Rail Link platform, and then bang, 4 minutes and you're in and out here. So it will reduce travel times, for instance, from Henderson by 22 minutes to get to the city centre. So again, it's not, people think of this as a city centre project. It's not, it's a regional project. It's actually an economic development project because it supports GDP growth for not just Auckland, but Auckland region and the whole country. So it's actually a really important thing to get the message across to everyone that this is for all Aucklanders and the region to enjoy, not just city centre businesses.
The trains that have got to go up the gradients, are they anything special, or are the lines special for that at all?
No, the trains have already go up those gradients today, so those electric units, the CAF units from Spain, have been designed to do that. We couldn't go much steeper than what we are, but they certainly will hold that grade. And also coming downhill, because of the regenerative braking arrangements that they have within their design, they'll be generating electricity as they put their brakes on going down the hill. So actually quite an efficient way of using the slope to one's advantage. Yes?
Are there plans to extend the network out to the airport?
Not our project. I can tell you I have worked on 4 airport projects in the past, and only one of them has been successful. And therefore the way in which it's delivered, I think, is something that others will be looking at very carefully as to how many people are with four suitcases, 3 children, and having to change modes on the way to the airport as opposed to going straight to the airport in a taxi or a shuttle or whatever. So there's all those sort of issues to think about. And some airport links work and others don't.
There's a lot more industrial area out by the development out by the airport these days as well.
There is, yes.
Passengers, especially what's happening
Yep.
there.
Yeah. No, you're right. There's lots of land there.
Is there any proposal to do the west, past the Swanson tunnel, the electrics coming first from a particular tunnel that changed to diesel into the west? So there's a huge population growth in QU overhead all that way, not being serviced. So is there any further expansion on the west line?
Yeah, I mean, our limitations are those parts of the network that are currently served by those electric units. AT, I'm assuming, will be looking at other areas for the capability of delivering the extended network in over time. I mean, the one thing that I feel absolutely certain is that once the City Rail Link is in place, it opens up the opportunity because it can carry 48 trains an hour into the city centre as opposed to 20 an hour into the city centre now. So the opportunities for the future connections and other uses are there that others will take the opportunity from. Yes.
Are you making provision to have North Shore make into the...
Yep, we are future-proofing that at Aotea. On an assumed alignment that goes down underneath the centre line of Wellesley Street. So we are putting deeper piles either side of that alignment and bridging across so that when that alignment ultimately is excavated, it won't disrupt the CRL services. And we've also highlighted where a connection into our concourse will take place from a North Shore line and taken account of, on our platform, the additional escalators that will replace the central stairs to carry the additional people interchanging. So yes, we have considered that as part of the overall proposal.
That number of trains that can, that the Central Railway link can cope with at the moment, has that got any ability to be cranked up?
It's unlikely, and I say this with great confidence because I've worked on a very similar project in London called the Thameslink project, which runs 24 trains an hour of 12 car length, and actually 24 trains an hour is about the maximum you can deliver reliably with the boarding and alighting profile of passengers at each of the stations. That's the killer. It's the time it takes you to get people on and off the trains at platforms that takes away the ability to run more trains. Now, you could say, let's take all the seats out the trains, make everybody stand and so on. It would be pointless, because you still can't get more people through 2 doors in a carriage when it stops at the station. So you'd lose all the time that you think you might gain by those extra people trying to get on and off. So you end up running less trains, not more. And we did a lot of research in the Thameslink project, which tried desperately to do exactly what you're suggesting. So 24 trains an hour is a realistic timetable certainty. 30 trains an hour just to recover from a problem. And that's usually where you run trains fast through stations as opposed to stopping them. But 24 trains is a good, realistic frequency. Yes?
All right. The initial design of the tunnels, and where was that done? Was that done overseas or?
No, it was all done here. I was in that initial team that started off in 2012 with a line on a map, basically saying this is what we wish to do, and we literally, as Chris's team, the Oricon team, Mott MacDonald, Arabs, we were all together in one office at that time up at Oricon in Newmarket, and every single day we had a design review of every single component of what we needed on the project, and over about a 5-month period we put the whole lot together as an integral design of track, tunnels, stations, structures and systems. And that's how the current design, it hasn't varied too much from that. That's how the current design concept was put together, and that went into the notice of requirement originally, and then ultimately the RMA hearings, and which I gave evidence at, and then the designation that we got from that. So it's been a progression from that early concept through to developed design, through to reference design, and we're now in that position for encouraging tenderers to come and bid for taking that design through the detailed design process and construction. Yes?
Has there been any sort of major thought in relation to the train railway network, but the integration with other services and other profiles, and as in the bus linkage to the shore, park and ride?
Yep.
Is there any other sort of integration to that train thing and
Totally.
the coordination of that whole process?
Yep, in parallel with the City Rail Link development, and Auckland Transport can explain this far better than I can because it's their plan, they're changing their bus network from running parallel lines to those of the railways to what they call hub and spoke. And hub and spoke basically is choosing key interchange locations, Manukau being one for instance, where the buses will all go to that place, and the people that want to go into the city, which would have been a parallel bus service, will simply catch the train into the city. And if you're running those extra frequency services, then hub and spoke is totally complementary to the intensified rail system that CRL is putting together. So all of that is part and parcel of an integrated transport policy. In addition to that, we have Wellesley Street will have one of the largest bus interchanges in the city centre for all of the buses coming in, and they've just recently published the new plan for the way in which those buses will arrive, and that is right next door to our Wellesley Street station entrance for City Rail Link. It's also would then link into the North Shore, and the North Shore alignment under Wellesley Street of course goes through to the university and a station at the university if that ever happens. So you can see the whole thing is a strategic plan that's being put together piece by piece, but it is integrated. And that's a real pleasure to see, because so many cities actually don't integrate their systems well. So
the only thing I find disappointing that I don't necessarily see, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with the train network is required or the bus system, but what I see missing with the whole process is why they're not making the use of the harbour. It's a free connection roadway just sitting there waiting for boats to sit on.
this is in terms of ferry services.
Correct.
Yes.
Because I mean, you can connect those all in,
Yep.
and I mean, you don't have to go to Sydney.
Mhm.
You get on constant ferries going round every 5-10 minutes, then get off and there's a bus waiting for you on a link, circular route. No one takes cars there because you don't need to. We still can't get out of this mentality of driving a car to a park and ride, getting on a bus or getting on a train. If you just had little interlinking circular buses picking people up non-stop going around every 5 minutes, either to a ferry, to a bus terminal or to a train, would make logical sense.
I don't disagree with that at all. I can tell you I sank many beers with my colleagues from North Greenwich working on Crossrail, catching the ferry up to London Bridge to get the train home. And that was 2 or 3 times a week. So, absolutely
it's just that
agree.
You're not paying for infrastructure. You're paying for a train, it costs a certain amount of money. The infrastructure's sitting there floating on the water. There's nothing to spend. There's no tunnelling to do. Just put a couple of ferry points out and you can do a couple of bus links.
I mean, the great thing now is, of course, we've got hot cards, and hot cards work on the buses, the ferries, the trains, and that's a real revolution in terms of the flexibility it gives you to be able to use them. And I am certain that those sort of things will come in terms of using more of the water as part of that system. But again, that's not us. We're just digging holes humbly in the ground and developing this little railway.
Fair enough.
All right, well, I think we'll call it quits at that. Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We really appreciate the time you've taken out of your day to come and speak to us today. It's been very interesting.
No, you're very welcome.
Awesome.
And I can tell you the number of jobs that will arise from the project. I mean, we're looking at probably 1,600 jobs at peak throughout the works. We aim to leave permanent markers in terms of developing skills and using the social outcomes through the sustainability work with schools, colleges, apprenticeships and other things. And that, I mean, we've also already had some great work done by interns in our office already, and that will continue, and that's our next generation of really enthusiastic engineers and architects taking projects forward.
Fantastic.
And it's a fabulous project that we feel passionate about.
Awesome.